IVM.
Hi everybody, just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashdin Doctor, your habit coach. And we've been listening to Devdutt Pattanaik in the first part of Understanding Finances. He's just come out with a brand new book called How to Become Rich, 12 Lessons I Learned from Vedic and Puranic Stories. And we've been discussing these big ideas on understanding finance and money. And now this is part 2 of that podcast. If you haven't heard the part 1, please make sure you do listen to that as well. Enjoy. Devdutt, that is a very powerful point for multiple reasons. One is the fact that you check it around your birthday, right? So there is a very close relationship with birthday and death in that sense, right? You survived one more year around the sun, right? But the whole thing is that how do you make yourself comfortable with the idea of death? I know we might probably going a little bit off topic here, but it's so important because you are leaving an inheritance for somebody. It is your gift to the next generation, like you just said right in the beginning of this conversation. And very often we just don't even treat it like a gift. We think that we're going to live forever. And it's so strange. Just today in the afternoon, I was having a shower and I was thinking that what if I suddenly had 3 different life insurances for each of my cousins? One thing is for sure, I'm going to die. At least they'll get some money out of it. Might as well at least think of my death as an investment in that sense. I'm very dark sometimes in these kinds of conversations because it's important to have.
No, I don't think it's dark at all. One of the best things that happened, when my mother was very old, is we used to discuss death regularly. We used to discuss about her growing old. She was losing control of her body. She was a very powerful woman. She used to take care of everything in our house. She managed the money. My father trusted her with all the money and financial investments. And then as she grew older, she was losing her memory. Her body was becoming weaker. We felt very sad. But, we would talk about the fact that this is part of life. And then we would, at one point, we would say that, oh, your Yamraj is your boyfriend who has abandoned you. And my mother would burst out laughing and we would make fun and jokes about death because I wanted it to be not a terrible thing. And then she would talk about end of life care. She would talk about what she wants to be done with her body, she had a lot of these, what is it called? Those share certificates. She she liked the share market. For some strange reason, she used to put money in the market and she didn't know how much she had. And she had these papers and she had not done dematerialization. And I, was like, if you don't do that, we'll have trouble because after you go, it'll become a problem. Now you're there, you can sign. And it took about 2 years, because we talked about all these things and she was thinking, yes, what happens if I die? What will happen to these papers? What will happen to my children? And we dematerialized and we realized she had saved a large amount of money on her own, with no knowledge of the stock market, just over the years, putting some money there and here. And I think this conversation of death with her calmed her down. It was not frightening at all. Death became a friend. And it became, when she passed finally, my siblings, my sisters and I, we were like, we didn't fight over anything. We knew what to do. We knew how she wanted her body to be treated. We performed all the ceremonies with so much of grace and dignity. We had a good time as a family that we had talked about all these things. And I think the stress of death was taken away from our lives. I think these are important conversations to have. It's not morbid at all. I think, like health matters, when you have a stomach upset, you have to talk about your stomach upset. When you have a mental breakdown, you have to talk about your mental breakdown. We are all going to die and it's okay to talk about death. And that's why, right now, after a few days, there will be Ganesh Chaturthi and after that, the Shraddh, 15 days of Shraddh. And I think traditionally every year, 15 days was given for us to talk about ancestors. In all cultures around the world, there is, a festival or a day dedicated to the dead. I think that's a good custom to remind everyone that you are not immortal. Death is not a terrible thing. It's okay. And you should think about the living at that time. Should you die? I mean, God forbid, suddenly it can happen to a young person. It can happen to an old person. It can happen to anyone. How do you prepare yourself? It's like, does your husband know to cook? Because what if the wife dies? And, these men who don't know how to cook suddenly feel, oh my God, meri patni nahi hai, main kya karunga? And this kind of silliness. And I think these kind of things we have to learn. It prepares us. It's de-risking. No, it's like in business, you de-risk yourself. So I think talking about Yamraj and death, will is very, very important. It's very, very important. And I think if nothing else, at least during Shraddh or, whenever you're having these, Chinese have these ghost day. They have a ghost day when you celebrate ghosts. You burn money for ghosts. It's a very famous festival in Singapore. And I was like, that's a great ceremony. We should talk about the dead. We should talk about ancestors. And we should know that one day we'll be ancestors too.
Beautiful. In fact, we have in our Parsi community, we have muktads, which are that. And it reminds me of a very cute story with my 92-year-old grandparents. So 92 in my Parsis, right? We lived up till that. So my 92-year-old grandmother is teaching my grandfather how to make chai. And he's like, why you want me to teach me now at 92? And she's like, no, if I die before you, then who's going to make tea for you? And it's exactly what you were saying. Who's going to learn about cooking? And that morning chai is like the most important thing in anybody's life, right? So how to make the perfect chai. And, there's another very important conversation that people don't have. And that is coming back to the book about money. People just don't talk about money. It's something that fascinates me because I come from a business family. So dinner table conversation was money.
Yes.
But many homes don't even know what the other person's salary is, family member's salary is. They don't discuss money. They don't discuss anything. Is there any thing that we can learn about discussing money, how to converse about it, how to share about it, or should you not?
I think money and death are very closely related. We don't talk about death, we don't talk about money. Money is a life-giving principle, and death, of course, is the end of life. And it's funny why we don't talk about it, because survival, in order to survive in this world, we need goods and services. And in order to get goods and services, we need money. And for that money, we have to give goods and services. So it's a very simple thing, really, if you think about it from a logical point of view. But I think somewhere in our minds, money is evil. Don't be commercial. Especially Indians have this thing about don't be commercial. Baniya ke jaise mat socho. We look down on the traders and we look down on business people. India has a very strange way in that way, and you worship Lakshmi. We are a country which worships Lakshmi. If money falls on the ground, we are like, oh my God, paisa gira hai ground ke upar, you don't put your foot on it. All these kind of things are there. And I think it's because we have not normalized these things. We made this very exotic. And if children are not taught, you shouldn't, it's the poor people are forced to think about money because money is not there. And rich people are thinking about money because they have so much of money. But I think really the story is between the two. Because if you understand the concept of Swarg, where you have money to take care of your life and extra, and Nark, when you don't have enough to take care of your life, these are states of mind, states of existence. And all our festivals, whether it's Diwali, whether it is Onam, whether it is Vishu, all these festivals are fertility festivals, where you invite Lakshmi to the house. And I think this is why we make a mistake. We think, padhai karo. Arey, padhai kyun kar rahe ho? Padhai kar rahe ho because you want a set of skills that will make you valuable in the business, in the market. And it's something that is, I don't think this connection is made. School is connected to vocation, and that's why we don't really educate ourselves. We go to school for a job, but we don't really say, oh, why should I learn literature? That's to make you a better person. That's not to get you a job. There are two parts to education. One part is to get you a job, and the other part is to make you a better person, well-read, familiar with music, and with the arts. That's why Indians don't go to museums. We don't go to art collections because we have not been educated. We have been told, padhai karo, job milega. And that's a very foolish way to look at education. And I think that's why we don't understand Saraswati properly. We don't understand Lakshmi properly. And perhaps that's why we are a poor country. We are a poor country because we really have not understood Lakshmi and Saraswati, who are the goddesses of India. And without whom even, Riddhi Siddhi of Siddhi Vinayak is basically Lakshmi and Saraswati, your intellectual and your material benefit. This is unfortunate in our country. In our country, we really don't talk about money. And I'm glad you are asking me these, because when people talk to me, they only want to know about soul and spirit and moksha and maya. And I bring them back to Lakshmi. And I'm like, you know what? Let's talk about Lakshmi. Because if you can't do charity, you are not spiritual. If you are not generous, you're not investing in other people, you are not spiritual at all. Everything else is nonsense. And in order to invest in others, you need extra resources. And you can only have extra resources when you have enough for yourself. So the conversation really comes down to Lakshmi. And, words like Mangal, Shubh, all this means, Shubh and Mangal basically mean the arrival of Lakshmi when you have wealth to satisfy your needs and the needs of other people.
I recently had done a podcast on how to become more interesting, just as a thought, because it's so because many people don't know how to have conversations because they don't know enough. Like what you're talking about, Saraswati. There's no knowledge, there's no information coming in. So how will you have conversations going out?
Yes. The thing is, because we're not curious, we go to schools saying, "Padhai karo." We are not saying, seek what curiosity, to be curious. If you are curious, then automatically Lakshmi and Saraswati will enter your life because you are curious about how money walks into your life. And then you start going deeper and deeper because ultimately, as human beings, we have to feed ourselves. And if you have at a very basic core level, the morning chai, I always tell people, khana kahan se aaya? Let's talk about how does food come to my table. And you will learn about cooking, you will learn about your pantry, you will learn about how you store food, how does supply chain work, how do you go to the kirana, you understand about wholesale business, you learn about farming, you learn about so many things just by being one question, how does this cup of chai come to my table? And that's how you study. If you don't study it that way, you don't make it interesting. And then Lakshmi and Saraswati never come into your life.
Just becoming curious about the things around you. Like you said, how did this coffee come? How did this chai come? How is everyone going to work in the morning? Right? Those simple things can lead you to an idea that can give you both Saraswati and Lakshmi in that sense. Because it's giving you wisdom and an opportunity. You might suddenly think that, oh, these guys need sandwiches in the morning. Let me see what I can do for them.
You see opportunities. That's the whole thing. In the word is darshan karo. The Indian gods have these large eyes, and also because they're looking, they're curious, they are interested, they want to know what's going on in this world. I think they're only interested in what Bollywood stars are doing and what politicians are doing, and wasting our time trying to figure out who slept with whom, who killed whom, who murdered whom, what is Taliban doing, what is Afghan. I mean, I think those news is not going to help you. It's great for a 5-minute conversation, for time pass. But I think we should focus on living our lives better. And I think being curious about, how do I improve my health? How do I improve my house? How do I have a better meal? How do I have a better walk? How do I have a better friend? I think that should be the pursuit.
Devdutt, you segue this conversation to something that I was really dying to ask you, which was how did you become curious about all the things that you studied and then started writing about? Because these are two important habits. One is the information coming into you processing it, and then you being able to put it out in a way that we can understand. So where did this start from?
So, you see, I used to, I'll talk about the second part first. My father did his MBA in New York before IIMs were started in India. So IIM came to India in the 1960s, and my father did his MBA in New York University in the 50s. And when he came to India, he was jobless because nobody knew what an MBA was. Right.
That's hilarious. Okay.
Yeah. And then he became a marketing consultant. He did quite well. And I told my father one day that why don't you write about your life? Because there's so much of, this whole journey that you keep telling us in our family conversations. Don't you think people would love to know about it? And he said, that's a very good idea. But he would never write down. And then he passed. And I realized that all the knowledge my father had and acquired, going to America, coming to India, this fabulous stories that he told us about work and clients and customers and talking to his business. He didn't come from a business family, he came from Odisha. He didn't know anything about consulting and marketing and all these things. And I said, all that knowledge is gone. That was one. And I was like, I felt sad. And then when I was reading the Ramayana and Mahabharata, I realized both Ramayana and Mahabharata end with knowledge transmission. So Bhishma, when he dies, spends about 2 chapters out of 18 chapters of the Mahabharata. 2 chapters are knowledge transmission, where Bhishma is passing on all his knowledge to the Pandavas. Krishna is saying, you're going to die. Why don't you pass on all your knowledge? And the same thing happens in the Ramayana. In the Ramayana, Ravan, when he's dying, Ram looks at Lakshman and says, when he dies, he'll leave behind all his wealth, but he'll take away all his knowledge. So why don't you engage in a conversation with him and take the knowledge from him? Because knowledge, how do you transmit knowledge? If you don't, you can carry your death takes away knowledge. Death does not take away Lakshmi, but it takes away Saraswati. And only now we are writing books and we have got these information, but everything cannot be captured, right? Everything cannot be captured in books. So this is which struck me very strongly early in my life. And I always said, knowledge has to be transmitted. So that's one bug I have. Anything I hear, anything I listen to, any idea that I have, I want to transmit it. And therefore, I've now written 50 books, 1,000 articles, everything. I'm continuously transmitting knowledge. For me, that's very important. The second is, of course, my interest in mythology is everybody kept telling that, hamare shastron mein bahut kuch likha hai. There's a lot of knowledge in our scriptures. And I would keep saying, can you tell me 3 points? Give me 3 points. I mean, can you just, like you do, you're talking about habits, can I implement it now? So I would ask people, acha, tu bolo na, and they will say, oh, nothing. It's all like this exotic, faraway, magical things in Vedas and Puranas and Shastras. And I'm like, tell me 3 things. Or they would tell me things like, economics is taught by Chanakya Arthashastra. I said, oh, is it true? Let me read Arthashastra. And I read it and I'm like, no, that's not economics at all. He doesn't talk economics. He's talking about political economy. He's talking about how a king should make money. He's not interested in how you and I should make money. He's talking about how the Raja should make money. I said, that's not the same thing. I'm like, oh, that is not. So people are talking out of the hat and they're not actually reading. And even today, when I talk about mythology, people say, Devdutt, tum economics ke bare mein kaise baat karte ho? I said, because Lakshmi is wealth. So jab Lakshmi ke bare mein hum padhte hain, when we read about Lakshmi in our scriptures, we learn about economics. Learn about Saraswati, you learn about knowledge. So I realize that people they talk a lot, but they don't actually read. And that's where curiosity became important. I started asking, why do festivals are held? And, the deeper I went, it became a well of knowledge. Everything opened up something else and opened up something else. And India is particularly a complex country. We have a lot of knowledge in oral traditions and rituals and symbols. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in Aladdin's cave. I've got like this. And I'm not happy just enjoying it. I want to share it with the world and monetize the process. So, that's the service I decided to give the world. I will give, okay, you don't have time to read the books. I'll read the books. I will simplify it and give it to you. In exchange, you give me money. So I gave a service to the world and the world rewarded me for it. So it was a yajna. So I will do all the work and I'll make it accessible to you. In exchange, you call me for a lecture, you buy my book, you read my columns. And that's what I did. I just did yajna. And it became, I combined Lakshmi and Saraswati. So curiosity also meant, if I find something new, I'll get a new article, new column, new idea, which I can monetize. So, I blended Lakshmi and Saraswati together over time. And I think that's what happened. I think that's what curiosity is all about. Curiosity is intellectual hunger. There's physical hunger and there's intellectual hunger. And I have intellectual hunger as much as physical hunger. Yes, I want a house, a car. I want the good things in life. That's material. But I also want good ideas. I want to learn what the world has to offer.
We're going to take a quick break. See you on the other side.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. Are the great values of our Constitution meant to be talked about by great men but not lived? On the longest Constitution, Priya tells us about domestic violence laws in India and the many kinds of violence inflicted on women. Here's a fun conversation about online dating apps on Cyrus Says, as Cyrus is joined by Snehal Kanor, co-founder and CEO of Truly Madly. On the Wire Talk, Siddharth is in discussion with Audrey Trishke, historian of South Asia and associate professor at Rutgers University. They discuss troll culture and the hate she received for her allegedly anti-Hindu views. On Audiogan, Kedar and Abhineet get some design perspective from Navneet Nair, director of design at PhonePe. And on Tere Mere Raste, Keshav takes us to Hyderabad, a melting pot of cuisine and culture. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. That is the most helpful thing that you could do to help us out. And finally, this week, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network, Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and Intel vPro. We really do appreciate the support. This is what makes it possible.
Welcome back. Let's jump into the conversation. Are there aspects of what you learned about not becoming materialistic as well? Because since we're talking about money and there is a whole movement towards, minimalism, not materialism and all of that, what have you come across with it?
So I think, we have to balance yoga and bhoga. One is not superior to the other. Bhog is enjoyment of life and yoga is restraint and contentment, right? So you have to have the good things in life, but you have to restraint and contentment. it doesn't mean you stop Lakshmi from coming. It means when the Lakshmi comes to you, you don't store, you share. So it's very different. People think, oh, I'm not going to do any job. I'm not going to work. So I'm now spiritual. No. That's not spiritual. Spiritual is Lakshmi will come, but you will tell, you know what, Lakshmi, I don't want you. I'm content. I will give it to someone else. This, I will not store you. I will share you. This is spirituality. When you are able to share more than store. So we have to look at it from an economic lens. Otherwise, it's also lazy. I'm lazy. Oh, I'm content. I don't want to do any work. But you're not helping anyone in the world. You're just lazy. And laziness is not spirituality.
No, not at all. In fact, when you actually go down that route of sharing and constantly giving away, you actually work harder than you've ever worked in your life. It's
Exactly.
it's hilarious how that happens, but you actually work far more because now you're actually driven by something that is not monetizable.
And
You're
it's
driven by something
you're getting
different.
this joy that you get when you're sort of helping people, when somebody reads a book or gets your service. That kind of joy is a very different kind of joy. And I think this ability is where spirituality comes in. So I saw spirituality not as the denial of Lakshmi, but as the sharing of Lakshmi. That for me, otherwise, if to say, no, I don't look at Lakshmi at all, then you're not looking at the world. The world needs Lakshmi. Otherwise, how will it survive? How will people eat? They'll starve and die. Right now, the economy is in a bad shape. Create jobs for people. The more you invest in the market, the more jobs you create. And the more jobs you create, people will have a livelihood. I want young boys and girls to have livelihood. Otherwise, they'll end up becoming criminals. And
Correct.
then, there are so many chores and the people are not working. There is a mess in the system. When you don't have jobs, then empty mind is the devil's workshop. You start doing stupid things, foolish things, and then the society is not a healthy place.
And I think in one of your books, I'd read about how people don't welcome Lakshmi and still at that same time complain about not having her.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, you're not welcoming the person in. You're saying that no, money is not good. Money is not good. Right? That is not welcoming the person in. How is she ever going to come into your life? At the same time, you're grumbling about not having enough.
Many people often tell me things like, Devdutt, you're very commercial. And I say, let me translate that to you. What you're saying is that I adore Lakshmi. You don't. So if you don't adore Lakshmi, she won't come into your house. And then who will pay your bills? Because in Hinduism, for example, there's a concept of rin. Rin is debt. We are all in debt and we exist to repay these debts. We owe things to our family. We owe things to society. Society is taking care of us. What are we giving back to society? These new words nowadays, giving back. But in ancient Manusmriti and all, they'll say the whole purpose of life is to repay debt. You will not get moksha till you repay all your debts, because there's no liberation unless you repay your debts. We are all indebted to society at large, to nature, to culture, to family, to friends, to institutions. And to repay debt, you have to invest in them. So this whole idea that I'm not commercial is very selfish. I'm like, what do you mean you're not commercial? How, if you don't create jobs for people, where will people get jobs from? It's not the job of the Tatas or Birlas or Ambanis or Adanis to create jobs. They are creating, millions of jobs maybe, but not enough. How many jobs have you created in your lifetime? Have you created at least 1 job, 2 jobs, 5 jobs, sustainable jobs? So then comes, first is job, then comes sustainable jobs, then comes, all kinds of questions will emerge. Giving, a part-time salary to your cook or a cleaner is not really a sustainable job. So you have to ask those difficult questions. And then, then comes the conversations. I think we don't do that enough in our country. That's why we are poor. Hum Lakshmi ko celebrate nahi karte. We don't realize economics is about Lakshmi. Uska aana, uska jana. She comes and she goes. If your economy is down, it means she's leaving, which means you are in Naraka. If your economy is good, it means she's coming and you have got to Swarga. And I would rather create Swarga than Naraka.
Such important principles, and especially I love the correlation between Saraswati and Lakshmi, because I keep saying that, and so many habits around this, which are the best investments you can make, are the investments in yourself, right? Saraswati is ultimately an investment in yourself that you're making, right? With the knowledge, wisdom.
You look at levels of it. So most people think of Saraswati as going to school and colleges, and they think of it as vocational training. Like, I learned maths, I learned engineering, I learned medicine to do a job. That is Vidya Lakshmi, knowledge that enables you to have a set of skills, to provide services, that gives you money. That's one type of Saraswati. The other type of Saraswati is figuring out yourself, being curious about yourself, identifying why are you so greedy? Why are you so jealous? Why are you so selfish? Why are you so nasty? Why are you not generous? What stops you from being generous? What stops you from being kind? What stops you from being a nice person? Why do you need to be nasty? These questions we don't ask ourselves. And if you don't ask these questions, then you will not grow as a person. Your wealth will grow, but you will not grow. And I think that is the Saraswati level. So I say level 1 and level 2. We focus too much on level 1. Ki IIM kar diya, IIT kar diya, I've got these qualifications. Or, some people say, I didn't go to school, but I'm a big businessman. I'm like, you're still talking in terms of making money. But what's your relationship with your money? Are you storing it for yourself or you're sharing it? Why are you storing it? If you're storing it, are you so insecure? How much money do you have? 5,000 crores. What are you going to do? You'll never spend 5,000 crores in your entire life. I know people who are 80 years old who have got 100 crores in the bank and they will still sit capital ko mat touch karo. And you're like, you're 80 years old. Even if you live till 100, you will not spend. Even if you spend 1 crore every month, you won't spend so much. And then you realize how foolish they are. They're storing and not sharing. And I think that's when you realize, Saraswati has not made you, spiritual upliftment has not happened. And generosity for me is a very important habit. If we don't develop, it's a very difficult habit. Very difficult. It's very difficult to be generous. We always are generous with, wo jo extra paisa hai. Being generous is a mindset. And that...
How do you define it?
The ability to satisfy other people's hunger. So when I can satisfy my hunger, I can satisfy your hunger. When I'm focusing on your hunger, I have entered the realm of generosity. And I'm figuring out, and then of course in generosity there is more things. It can be I just give you food, or I help you earn a living. So that's what I said. When investment and generosity come together, then it's magic.
So powerful. I know so many stories of people, like you said, 1,000 crores in the bank, 100,000 crores in the bank, but they still feel they don't have any money to spend.
Yes.
They are rich, but living again in hell, right? It's so interesting.
Objectively, they are in Swarga. The whole world thinks they are in Swarga, but in their minds, they are in Nark. And that is because they have not invested in their own growth spiritually. And and as I said, spiritual ka ek hi indicator hai. Are you thinking of other people's hunger? Are you thinking of their finances? The Tata Trust, for example, or these big trusts and all that. Somebody decided, what? We have to put this money aside to share because we have made enough. Everybody has made enough. They're like, okay, we have made enough. What do we do with this extra money? Let's find a way to churn it. And they're always businessmen. You're always churning it. It's not a black hole. It's not somewhere you just, hum charity karke paisa phekenge tumhare upar, diamonds de denge. No. That is not, nature doesn't function like that. Nature is always investing. Nature does not, even a tree which falls in the forest will be eaten by maggots and everything is used. So it's not like a waste of things. So everything's cyclical and you have to keep investing. So I like that idea of yagya because it is cyclical. It's about give and receive and give and give and receive. And same thing applies to charity. The more charitable you are, the kinder society you create.
The kinder society you create. Devdutt, any last thoughts that you have on what you would like to share? Anything that we missed out that you feel is important? I think...
there's one idea which I always tell people that whenever we're eating achar, it's a thing, Annapurna's achar, I call it. So when, I tell people, whenever you eat a fruit, there is a fruit part to it and there's a seed part to it. And then there's this achar business. And really it's about our lives, right? When you earn salary, you want to enjoy it. That's the flesh of the fruit. So you eat the fruit. But if you were to pickle a part of it, you can enjoy it a few days later when the fruit is in short supply. So mangoes are great in summer, but in winter I can get the achar. And that's really a short-term savings. For your holiday, for your little expenses, for your birthday gifts, for your parties, which you have every year, which you can predictable expenses. And then you have the little seed inside the fruit, which you have to plant in a forest, which will turn into a tree. And that tree will become a bear fruit. And that's your investments. So look at your salary as this fruit and always eat a bit of it, pickle a bit of it, and sow the seed for the future. And I think that's the thought that I would like people to leave behind. So whenever you eat a pickle, when you ever eat fruit, look at this phal, beej, or achar.
I'm clapping on this side. I love it. Just summarizes finance and everything just so beautifully in a mango. Achar, love the thought. Devdutt, thank you so much for coming and being a part of the Habit Coach podcast. Like I said, big fanboy moment for me. And this conversation was so interesting, especially introspective for a part of my life that I'm on currently. So absolutely brilliant. Devdutt, how can people follow you, get in touch with you, learn more about what you do?
So the easiest way is to be part of, I have got a Facebook page, which is Devdutt Myth. That's the handle. There's also Instagram, Devdutt Myth, DVDUTTMYTH. And of course, I have my website, devdutt.com. So these are the three places that you can, and I don't allow commenters in my Facebook because, you have all kinds of spammers and everything. So just follow that and pick and choose what you like.
I love it. And you've become very active on Instagram recently through this lockdown. I was noticing all the little...
But I'm now controlling myself. Too much of bhog has happened. Now yoga is required. I need to pull back. I've got a little crazy.
I love your post-it notes and your little writings on them. Superb.
Thank you so much. Thank you for noticing.
Thank you so much for coming. Loved it.
Bye-bye.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Ashdin Doc on Twitter and Instagram. You can find lots more information on my website, awesome180.com, or check out different content on my YouTube channel called AWESOME180. That's Awesome180.
IVM